All right. Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Danny Lindemood, and I am the program manager with the Wellington Water Watchers, who is supporting Get Concerned Stratford. I am just going to get us started with a couple Zoom rules, Zoom etiquette for this evening. Just a note in general that this evening is going to be a little bit more of an informal night, and we will have just a little bit different format from other meetings if you've been to some of our other meetings. So just a couple notes. We do have closed captions available. They're right in the bottom of your Zoom window. There should be a little box that says CC, and you can turn those on if you need them. We are recording tonight, just so you know. So if you have your video on, we encourage that. We like getting to see all your faces, but we are recording. And then you all have been muted to start this evening, but we will have a portion in the evening where we might be inviting people up to speak, just so you're aware. And then for everything else, you can just use the chat box there. If you need any help throughout the meeting, you can just send a direct message to me or just put it in the chat and I'll reach out. And then finally, it would be lovely if all of you would introduce yourselves so we can get to know you a little bit better, where you're joining from, if not from Stratford itself, as well as just any questions that you have this evening. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Melissa to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us again here tonight. I know Christmas is just around the corner, and we sincerely appreciate you spending your time with us here. For anyone that's just joining us for the first time, my name is Melissa Verspeten, and I'm the spokesperson for Get Concerned Stratford. Today, Mike Sullivan and I were to meet with the mayor at 11:30 this morning. At 10:30 last night, Mike received an email saying that the meeting would now be by phone. The mayor's reasoning being the COVID changes that are coming on the 26th. During that call, the mayor assured us that nothing would happen before mid-January and that we will be given at least a week's notice of any meetings pertaining to Shinyi. The mayor also asked what benchmarks for environmental controls would be acceptable to Get Concerned Stratford, since Shinyi has said that they will abide by provincial standards, insinuating that our only concern is the level of particulates, sulfur dioxides, and nitrous oxides, when in fact it's so many issues besides that. He appears to be downplaying our concerns, trying to find a way in which Get Concerned would be okay with this proposal being moved forward. We have asked prior to each of our community meetings if the mayor would like to address the group, and he has declined each time. He did again decline. So for tonight, Mike Sullivan is going to discuss a letter that he recently sent to council and outline some of our concerns. And I'm not sure if I am handing this over to Mike Bockwell to facilitate things or if it's going straight to Mike. Okay, so we're going to go right to Mike Sullivan then. Okay, perfect.
Hello, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. It's been a quite the trip for the past 6 weeks, and what I wanted to start was to remind people that we started with 6 steps that the city could use to allow people to trust that they were on the right track. And those 6 steps weren't to just say no to the proposal. Those 6 steps were to reinstitute democracy into the system, to stop decisions, to submit technical reports, to provide peer reviews, implement conditions, and undo the MZO. However, I sent a letter to the council yesterday. I asked to speak to council, but was denied the opportunity to speak to council. So I sent them a letter. I'm hoping they've read it. And in that letter, we outlined all the things we've discovered since 6 weeks ago when we first started seeing this as a failure of democracy, and now we are seeing this as a bad proposal. it's not just that the council has hidden this from us for so long. It is that the proposal itself doesn't meet the test of something that we think the city of Stratford would want. I'll give you some examples of what we talked about, what I talked about in my letter, and my letter is available on the website if anybody wants to read it. With regard to the MZO itself, you may recall that both Xinyi in their formal documentation and the province, it's as though they wrote the same letter them together, have suggested that the city of Stratford doesn't have the wherewithal to do a planning exercise, and that only the province had the necessary expertise to do something for something this complex. The problem is that, as far as we can tell, the province didn't do it either. The province just issued an MZO. And we found that out by having an independent peer review of the air quality study, and discovered that there is much about that report that indicates that there was no planning process. Nothing was adhered to with regards to the Provincial Planning Act and the policy statement. So it appears as though the only backstop on this is the various permits that are necessary, the environmental permit and the water taking permit, etc. And those, yes, those would have done by the province anyway, but it looks like the province hasn't done anything with regards to a planning process that would have been done by Stratford had there not been an MZO. So that's point one. Since 6 weeks ago, we've also discovered that this company is a company that has hidden its ownership in the Cayman Islands and the British Virgin Islands. And one of the principal reasons for a company to do that is to hide itself from environmental negligence. So that should there be a problem, the city of Stratford and the province of Ontario could never go after the principals of this company because they're in another country and they're hidden by the laws of that country. So that is a difficulty, and we think the council should investigate that, should do due diligence as to what that really means. On the greenhouse gas emissions, we have asked from the beginning, what are the greenhouse gas emissions? And we've done our own estimates, and those estimates suggest that it's at least double. So it will at least double what Stratford now emits. And as a result, the city of Stratford actually asked Xinyi, what are the greenhouse gas emissions? And if you go to the City of Stratford website, you'll see Xinyi's answer never answers the question. They still don't tell you. So we're pretty sure we know what it is, and it's enormous. Air quality. We also discovered that there's a diesel part to this thing. It's not just natural gas running the furnace. There will be diesel from time to time. Should the natural gas, it's as a backup, but it will certainly happen. And there's been no air quality studies of what the results of burning 380,000 liters of diesel a day will mean. And Xinyi was actually quite surprised when the person from the Ministry of the Environment said, oh yes, it's not a generator, it's actually the furnace. So you have to report the emissions. We note the water taking thing. All that has happened so far is that the city of Stratford has said that this amount of water, which is a third of what Stratford now, or quarter of what Stratford now consumes, is permitted by the size of the aquifer. Well, nobody's done any recent studies of what the size of the aquifer is. And I should remind you all that in a Zoom meeting held by the Xinyi people themselves, they advised that should there be a shortage, they would not stop consuming water. They would expect the city of Stratford to stop consuming water. So you all would have to ration. They would not. They have been quite opaque with regards to the jobs. The jobs, they say there's a number of them, 320 to 380 jobs that would be created when this plant is running fully. But we've asked on a number of occasions, how many of those will be local and how many will be temporary foreign workers brought in from China or from Germany, as they've said in their meetings, to run this plant. And if their intention is to recruit locals, When will that happen? No answers, and very vague, non-promising statements by them. And that should have been much more definitive, and we're not aware of the actual timelines that they intend to abide by. In addition, they gave out a list of the salary ranges for all these jobs. And if you take the absolute lowest salary in all of the jobs and multiply that by the number of jobs in each category that they said would be there, you end up with a number that is significantly higher than the amount of money they said on their own website in China would be the labor costs of running this thing. So which one is the truth? I really don't know. And there's certainly no guarantees to anybody that what they've said they'd pay in Canada is what they'll really pay. The dormitory. Now, at today's, last week's meeting with Xinyi, the December 10th meeting, they suggested that this dormitory would only ever be used by 12 people at a time. The mayor advised us today that he thinks the dormitory is not going to happen, that they won't even build it. I'll believe that when I see it, but it still doesn't change any of the other problems. Future environmental actions. We know that the federal government has now proposed or is taking steps to institute $170 a ton carbon tax, which will raise the price of natural gas significantly for Xinyi. It will still be a tiny bit less than in China, but not a lot less than in China. So a large portion of the reason they gave their investors in China for coming to Canada was our price of natural gas was really cheap. And it was a quarter of what it was in China. That won't be the case after the carbon tax. The question is, there is a Foreign Investor Protection Act between Canada and China that protects investors from actions of governments that reduce their profits. And so can Xinyi allege that the carbon tax will reduce their profits and that therefore it would be illegal to tax them? Could Xinyi advise the Ontario government, which may in the future decide to lower the standards, raise the standards and lower the numbers for pollution emissions from this plant? Would Xinyi be able to challenge that in court? I don't know the answer, but that's something that City Council should have been investigating. Whether or not and maybe it requires a high-level meeting with the federal government to find out what the federal government thinks. We know there have been challenges under a similar act called the North American Free Trade Agreement, where companies in the US successfully sued Canada because Canada introduced environmental legislation that reduced their profitability. Does this act between China and Canada give that same right to a company like Xinyi? I don't know, but somebody should find out. We also are quite alarmed at the lack of proper consultation with Indigenous peoples. Now, I am not a representative of the Chippewa or any of the other bands that are downstream of Stratford, and they are aware of the project, though only recently aware of the project. They are aware of the MZO, but only recently aware of the MZO. They are conducting their own investigation and will take whatever action they need to take. But the obligation is on the Crown, which is the province, in lieu of the federal government, to meaningfully consult with Indigenous peoples whose land and rights may be affected by any project. And this is certainly a project that would affect the land, no question. So those are just some of the things we've discovered since 6 weeks ago that weren't in the equation when we started this process. In addition, some have pointed out that the very nature of Stratford may be in jeopardy by the imposition of such a massive factory on the southwest corner of Stratford. And as someone on this call pointed out last week, there's enough land for 2 factories. They're buying enough land to build 2. The mayor has indicated in one of his statements that there might be as many as 1,600 jobs created by this investment. And so if they do build 2, what people will see as they enter the city of Stratford is not the welcome to Stratford sign, but 2 giant smokestacks, or 1 at least, and maybe 2. And you'll be able to see that from any direction because it will be taller than anything that exists in this community. The next tallest things will be less than half that height. And those are the water towers. So is Stratford willing to have itself defined by being a glass factory town instead of being a festival town? It's a question that council needs to ask and answer. Council needs to actually wrestle with the thought of, will this be too big a thing and overwhelm the economics of and the very fabric of what Stratford is? Will it will be much more of a focal point economically than the theaters. It will be something that may in the future define Stratford. I don't know the answer to that, but it's something that deserves consultation. So far, there's been 1 hour of public consultation on this proposal. On November the 16th, the city of Stratford held a Zoom meeting and invited people, I think with 5 days notice, to present their thoughts to the council. And that a total of 14 people managed to get on the list. I was one of them. That took an hour or a little over an hour, maybe a little under an hour. Is that all that all the consultation that this deserves? I think not. I think it deserves a whole lot more dialogue and discussion. So what we have now is that council, or the mayor has told us that council has decided to take a time out, if you will, and wait until mid-January to make a decision. Their decision isn't whether or not this is a good idea. Their decision is on whether or not spending $6 million to approve the site plan is a good idea. If they say no to the site plan agreement, then perhaps that will be the end of it. But I don't know for certain. The minister has given himself certain powers. The minister could, in fact, impose this on Stratford, though it's very unlikely, but I can't. So was an MZO 2 years ago. So what we and Get Concerned Stratford have done is look at this, the 6 steps to restore confidence in democracy in Stratford, and determined that there is so much going against this thing that it's not something that Stratford, we don't believe it's something that Stratford should have. It's not a good fit for Stratford. But we want to hear from you. Maybe the people on this call all think that, oh yes, it's a really good idea. We just need to fix the democracy so we can consult. I'm not the one with the answer to that, you are. And so when you start giving us feedback tonight, we want to hear from you about whether or not we can pivot from this is a problem of democracy to this is a problem that this plant doesn't belong here for all the reasons I've outlined. That's what I've got to say. Unfortunately, I have a family commitment. I have to leave in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to pass it back to the organizers and let them tell you that.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Mike Balquill. I work as the campaign director with the Wellington Water Watchers, and we're supporting you in your campaign. And so I'm going to, we're going to have open it up for some conversation now. I just again want to frame the question and talk a bit about how we're going to try and do this, because there's lots of people on the call. So as Mike and Melissa said, the mayor asked them to meet. He said he wanted to know what Get Concerned's real position is, and Get Concerned, the leadership group, wants to talk to you and understand clearly what the community wants. So as Mike, I'm just restating this, as Mike said, 6 weeks ago, the community, all of us were caught off guard by this proposal and by what Jamie Gibb, who's on the leadership group, calls a hush and rush approach. And so the first set of demands that we put out were slow this thing down. And here's the 6 things you have to do to prove to us that you're interested in local democracy. As Mike has said, we've learned a lot. Our position has evolved. We think what we've been hearing from the community is that you want to reject the proposal completely based on what you've been hearing, based on the polling results, etc. But we did not want to assume that. The other aspect of this is, while we value the conversations that we've been having with the mayor in the last two or three conversations we've had for the mayor, we want to make these conversations transparent. And we want to be sure that we reflect the wishes of the community. So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to create some time for people to speak to it. A little later, we're going to have an actual vote in the chat box. We've got a survey for you to fill in, and we'll see what the results are. So the question that we're asking is, do you feel that if the council goes through the steps that we've described, independent peer review, for example, revoking the MZO and subjecting Xingyi to a full planning process, and the additional things that were in there, is that what you want? Is that enough? Or have, over the past few weeks, you've come to the decision that you understand enough about the Xingyi proposal that you want the council to reject it? So that's the question we're going to ask you to comment on. You can make comments in the chat box to each other. You can come on the screen and make a comment. I do want to suggest that if you're going to speak, that you put your name in the speakers list, and then I'm going to call you to the virtual microphone here to make your comments. And I'm going to ask that you try and limit, well, I'm going to really encourage you to limit your comments to 1 to 2 minutes, because there's a lot of people on the call here. And if 10 people talk for 5 minutes each, that's a whole hour of talking. So I'm going to really encourage you to speak for 1 or 2 minutes to that question of what do you want, what is the position we should take with the city on this. If you have questions about what Mike said or what Melissa said, or questions you have about what's going on, or the technical details of the proposal, please put those in the chat box and we'll try and answer them later. This isn't really a questioning and answering part of the agenda. This is, what's your opinion about what our demand is at this stage? I'll just say it one more time, and I'm watching for names to be sent to me for the speakers list. So if you want to speak, put your name in the box, in the chat box. And is it enough for the council to follow the steps we recommended to make the process more democratic? Or do you support rejecting the Xingyi proposal at this stage? So the first name I've got on the speakers list is Ken Wood. So Ken, if you can unmute yourself and start your video if you like as well. And if after a couple of minutes I think you're starting to go along too much, I'm going to maybe interrupt with my voice and ask you to speed it up. But Ken, start us off.
I'm just giving you permission to unmute here, Ken. All right, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to say very briefly, I'm definitely a hard no. I think we all have more than enough information just based on all of the 8 or 10 different reasons, air quality, etc. But to me, the very biggest reason is that we have to teach this city council and our city that they cannot do these kinds of undemocratic backroom things going on. I think that this has to be rejected from my point of view, because the city did not do what it should do, which is to be transparent. And I think more than any other reason, that should be a big no, but there are so many other reasons that makes it a huge no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And the next Pardon me, the next speaker is Manfred Moirer. And while Danny makes him a co-host, I just want you to look in the chat box, folks. There's an awful lot of I reject, we reject 100% happening in the chat box. Manfred, are you available to speak to us? You're a co-host, Manfred, so if you unmute, you can talk.
Yes, do you hear me? I hear you.
I hear you too.
Okay, good. I have a major concern with the whole issue. We have no way of knowing if the mayor and councillors actually listen to us. We're sent emails, we phone them. I have phoned several times. Otherwise, I don't know if they listen to our emails. They always refer back to the information they have from the proponent of the project, which of course is lopsided. And we just simply do not know because we have no direct contact. As I think Mark Sullivan said, he was not allowed to talk to council or the mayor. He listened to them. But what's wrong with council listening to us? And they want to be informed to make a decision about this. Why are there restrictions to any of the process of this? They are not present at this Zoom meeting. They don't inform themselves. Are they being directed? Are they actually free to have their own opinion and make their own decision? Or are they put under pressure? So how do we know? What can we do? Can we just insist we want a meeting with you on Zoom? You're all present. We can ask questions. You have to answer us. We cannot get to them.
Thank you, Manfred. I think that's so important, and we appreciate your comments here. I'm just gonna get Mike back on the screen here. We just lost him for a second here, but he's back. So. And then just so you know, on deck for our next speaker, we have Charlene Smith, and I'll be getting you your permissions just in a second here, Charlene. I'm just going to make sure that Mike can get back on the call here. All right. All right, Mike, you should have your co-host permissions back.
Sorry, folks, I just had a little glitch out there with my internet. Did you get the next speaker lined up, Danny? Is Charlene available to speak?
I just made her a co-host, so she should be able to unmute now.
And after Charlene, we're going to hear from Margaret.
Okay, so there are a bunch of different questions that I have for council. Both my husband and I, and just about anybody I talk to, have said that they 100% do not want this glass plant. Number one, the environmental concerns. There's no actual environmental impact statement, assessment, or anything else done. And as far as I'm concerned, and as far as anyone that I have spoken to is concerned, that is completely and totally wrong. And we can't do that, not here in Canada. I don't really give a rat's ass what they do in China. That's in China, and their pollution is through the roof. I don't want them coming here and deciding that, well, we're going to use all of your resources and we are going to make everything horrible for you because we've done it in our own country. And there are other things that we have to look at, such as infrastructure. And is there any sort of wastewater treatment that's going to be happening? What's going to happen to our wastewater treatment? How is the water going to get to them? How is the glass going to be moved out of the city? Is there going to be transportation? Is there going to be more trucks on the road? How many more trucks on the road? There's a lot of different questions that have, pardon me, that have not been answered by anybody.
Thank you, Charlene. We're going to hear from Margaret Thompson, and then after that, Jamie Gibb. So I'm going to try and do this, say who the next speaker is, so you can be ready, and so that Danny can make you a co-host so you're ready to go. So Margaret, you're up next. And I think, Margaret, you had a 25-minute conversation with Randy Pettipiece that you want to give us some headlines about.
Yes, I had a 25-minute conversation with Randy this afternoon. And I think my primary takeaway from the conversation is that he's very uninformed. It was not a monologue. In other words, I didn't get on the phone and just blah, blah about why I was opposed to the plant. Nor was it a confrontational conversation, but I did ask him a series of questions. The only issue that he seemed to have any awareness of were the issues around emissions and air quality. I asked him questions about whether he had read the results of the poll. No, he wasn't aware of that. Was he aware of the transportation issues around railway, trucks? No, he didn't know about that. Was he aware of issues around the National Intelligence Act and the surveillance by the Chinese? No, he didn't know about that. So, I mean, I could go on, but when I asked him what his position was on the plant, his comment was, I'm here to support the three councils and to support whatever it is they decide. And he was sitting on the fence. He wasn't really willing to commit to anything. But my big concern is that was his level of ignorance, the fact that he was so uninformed about the issues. Randy is a major player here. And for him to be, to reveal this level of ignorance about the issues is frightening. Because he's a provincial MP. He's in the back pocket of the developers and Doug Ford. And I'm sure he was a mover and shaker on the MZO. And yet, whether he's faking ignorance or whether he really is ignorant is a moot point. But I came away from the whole conversation very disheartened.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm going to call now on Jamie Gibb, and then after that, Laura Pogson.
Yeah, I wanted to just make a quick comment on where we are in our journey at this point in time. 6 weeks ago to today on December 22nd, and to upcoming January 15th, 16th. And when we were starting 6 weeks ago, if we were a hockey team, we were trapped in our own end with tremendous pressure on us. And if you look at the progress we've made in the last 6 weeks, it's like the momentum has truly swung around to the home team side. And I consider us to be the home team. Get Concerned, Wise Communities, and all the people who are acting independently within Stratford. And just like in the hockey analogy, it feels like we have them collapsing back in around their net, being very defensive. They look tired. It looks like they want to get off the ice and just rest their legs. And we have the momentum, and we've got the crowd buzzing. We really do. We've got the energized crowd behind us. And now we go into this 2-week Christmas break, 4-week COVID break. And that's just like the other team being able to call a timeout and get their players to the bench and rest and regroup and get their heads back on straight and try to come back out fresh, which is what I would expect them to do in the middle of January. So for us, what I would encourage everyone to do is just make an imprint of where you are right now, what your thoughts and feelings are on the project, what your motivations of being involved are, what your primary concerns are, and also maintain that feeling of community and collegiality that we all have with one another right now. And then bring that back whenever you're ready to come back, whether it's early December, mid-December, or sorry, early January, mid-January, and just reprise all those feelings that you can imprint right now, right today, and be ready to hop on the ice again when the city's ready to go. Thanks. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Jamie. And folks, if you don't know, Jamie's part of the leadership group of Get Concerned. And at the end of this meeting, we'll be sure that we introduce everybody who's part of the leadership group so you know who they are. Laura Pogson, you're up next. And after that is Tori Sutton. And then Eleanor Kane. And then I don't have anybody else on the speakers list. So Laura, I think you're been made a co-host.
And am I live?
You're live.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And I want to say a huge thank you to all the people who have enlightened us and encouraged us and informed us and given us valuable information. But what I wanted to address is beyond us, and I think we are all on the same page here. We're all on the hockey team with you, Jamie. But I realize, and many of you do too, that Canada, across Canada, is waking up to the fact of the goal of Beijing. And it's well known that Beijing's goal is to take over the world economically, financially, technology, and all the rest of it. And that's what is alarming me, that if Canada has wakened up to this and Canada is taking steps to curtail the movement of Beijing in our country, then Stratford Council needs somehow to be wakened up to this fact. And while we're on the same page and we're all together in our thoughts, how do we break through to council how significant this move coming out of Beijing and China and forcing Canada to accept some of these things that they're trying to bring into us? How do we get to council on that one?
Thank you, Laura. Tori Sutton, you're up next. And after that is Eleanor Kane.
Thanks for the opportunity. You know, I'm a former journalist. I covered Stratford City Council for almost 10 years, almost every single meeting. I'm a strong believer in the public process. So, you know, there's part of me that always likes to see things. So, you know, I'm sitting here debating in my head, what's the best strategy, but I'm debating it because what's the best strategy to meet our eventual end goal? And my concerns, and I'm really, you know, preaching to the choir because it sounds like most people are just a hard no at this point. But, you know, I just think it's a little too late for that process at this point. And I think I'll echo some of the statements that have already been made. I feel like this being in the pandemic situation has thrown up more of a wall than certainly other citizen groups have faced in other projects I've covered in my years here. Being unable to physically represent in numbers in chambers, like that is very impactful when you're sitting in that room, and we don't have that opportunity right now, and we won't, and it is what it is. So, you know, what would be our most successful path? I think that, you know, a traditional public process at this point is just, it's too little too late. You know, sure, I mean, hey, if we get into a situation where you're able to appeal decisions and things, that's great, but it's also costly. And, you know, people are being very generous to this cause, but we know that, you know, our pockets are only so deep. So I just think that in my experience as 10 years as a community reporter, there's been very few issues I've covered that have had this kind of momentum, that have had this kind of overwhelming response. The fact that there's, you know, I think well over 130 of us on here last minute, So anyways, environmental concerns are very real. The labor concerns are very real. I'm concerned about the overall focus by even our economic development agency here and what they're doing behind the scenes. And I've had some concerns about their leadership over the years as well. This is not a Tom Patterson situation. This is not a visionary development to change Stratford for the better in our economy. So I would say, even as a strong believer in the public process, I'm a no. They need to know we're just not in favor of this. And just to piggyback on the last comment, an excellent book I read earlier this year is called Shanghai Free Taxi, and it's by an NPR reporter. And it's just kind of interactions in the new China. And it's really enlightening to kind of the state that China's in right now.
Thank you, Tori. Tori, thank you for the open letter that you wrote and published to the mayor. And we were pleased that we had your permission to reprint that and distribute it. You just mentioned a book, and if you don't mind, maybe you could put that title and author in the chat box so people who are interested can follow up. And you said 130 people on the call, but I just want you to know that there are 174 devices registered. And if there's more than one person in your household watching, then that's how many people. And we had over 400 people, not devices, 400 people RSVP for the meeting, which has been our attendance at all of these meetings. So as you say, there's extraordinary interest in this. The next person to speak is Eleanor Kane and then DJ Anderson. Eleanor, you're up.
Hi, this has been a wonderful dialogue, and there needs to be more dialogue. Something that concerns me greatly is the steps that were taken to bring this project to the state that it's in right now, have been guided, if you will, by not just council, but have been guided by Invest Stratford. And if you look at the mandate of Invest Stratford, it is to bring business to Stratford, and that is fantastic, and that there's a group of people that are dedicated to this. However, if you look at the board of directors, it's a bit of a cabal. I mean, it's people that are in business themselves and potentially would profit from whatever arrangements are made. And I suggest that this board of directors should include people with, arm's length wisdom and arm's length relationships, so that the decisions are not simply to line the pockets, if you will, of many of the people represented on the board. Dan Mathieson himself, our mayor, is on the board of directors, as is the chief administrative officer, the CAO, the new CAO of the city, Joan Thompson. So to me, this force that brings these projects forward to council and to our city, I feel it really needs some more arm's length guidance and judgment on decisions. And certainly the Chigny gas plant was ushered in with the work of this Invest Stratford. So I just wanted to kind of bring that into focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. And just before we go to the next speaker, which is DJ Anderson, Richard, somebody sent me a message in the chat saying, are you going to ask my question? And I've lost track of your question in the chat box, Richard. So if you can send me a private message with your question, we'll see what we can do. DJ Anderson, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. What I have to say, I guess, follows a bit on what Tori was saying. It does seem as though we're all of those who are here tonight are pretty much on the same page, which is great, but how do we progress this feeling that we don't want or need this here for all of the reasons stated? How do we, what strategies are there for us to progress the whole idea and convince those who are for the development and council, the city, to step back from this? That's the first question. The second question, and I don't know if anyone here can actually address it, is what are the legal, I mean, I understand that the lawyer's opinion was that if the council does not agree to the cost sharing for infrastructure, that is reason enough to cancel the arrangement without any liability. But if council does agree to the infrastructure agreement, does that mean that it's just all over and dead in the water?
So DJ, you've said two things which actually just fit perfectly with what happens next in the agenda, and you're the last person to be on the speakers list. So I'm going to build on what you said and kind of pivot to the next part of the meeting. Is that all right? And so I'm going to answer your second question first about the legality. And I was in conversation earlier today with David Donnelly of Donnelly Law, who's representing Get Concerned, and who you have heard at the debate, perhaps, if you were here at our first meeting. And one of the things he says is we really need to find out from the council whether or not they have signed a letter of intent, whether they have got any kind of, they've signed anything that has contracted them legally to approve Xingyi's proposal. I'm reading off my phone right now the message I got from our lawyer. So he says that, I'm just going to quote David for a minute here. Residents are spending considerable time and money providing evidence why Xingyi should not locate in Stratford. Is the City of Stratford Council contracted legally to approve Xingyi's proposal? Now, how they might have done that, there might be different ways, but have they signed some kind of agreement that puts them on a path to approval? Given that, how can Stratford Council stop Xingyi? If Council has been told Stratford can't stop Xingyi, will the mayor tell the residents that? So I think it's very critical actually for the mayor to respond to us. And we're going to follow up on this question from our lawyer with mayor and council. But I think that's, in terms of things to do, I think that's a question for you to start asking, mayor and council. And while we're formally going to make that request to the mayor, based on our lawyer's advice, that I think is the kind of thing for you to be asking in your conversations. Now, Richard, I see you're in the, you've sent me a message, thank you. So Danny, if you can make Richard Fitzpatrick a co-host, and hold him there for a second, because I'm going to speak for another minute or two, that that really is an important next step. And I have been noticing in the chat box that some people have been, early were making comments about talking to councillors and where they were at. And I think I saw somebody say that Danielle Ingram, Corey Sebin, and Jody Burback have all said to the people who were in the chat box that they oppose this. Somebody said Tom Clifford is on the fence. I think if you've talked to somebody and you want to share in the chat box where you think the councillor is at, that would be a very helpful thing to do right now. We're going to go to Richard in just a moment. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the action steps that we can take in the coming weeks. All right. So, Richard, are you a co-host? Yes, you are. So if you unmute, you can speak.
Hi. Am I there?
You're there.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, I've lived in this town for 25 years and or more, and it's a precious place, and it's been well nurtured by its citizens over the years and by its council, although sometimes they've made errors. Anyway, this is a major error that they're facing or trying to perhaps, you know, foist upon the town again. But I want to ask, where is the Stratford Festival's voice in this? They are the major stakeholder in this town. I mean, they have more clout than anyone of us. They bring everything to the table here. They have supported and made this town flourish over the past how many years? And we have to hear. We have to hear from them on this issue. We have to hear from the Stratford Festival because they have a lot of clout in this, and I think it's time that we hear from their leadership. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm going to build on something that you're saying. And folks, I just, I have to tell you again, I'm from out of town, right? I work for the Wellington Water Watchers. I don't live in Stratford. So I just want to be very clear. I'm giving you an out of town person's perspective in what I say next. But it's interesting to me that the councillors appear not to be willing to make a public statement for or against this. And something that they have said to a couple of people we've talked to is that they don't feel they can make a public statement without perhaps positioning themselves in some kind of legal difficulty and potentially breaking some confidentiality agreement. And personally, I think it would be very useful for the mayor to say clearly and publicly, can councillors speak publicly if they're for or against, and if not, why not? I think that needs to be made very clear. And this is why we sent the letter. That's why we had our David Donnelly write the letter to council to say you have the legal authority to say no. They have the authority to say no. There needs, hopefully I'm building on what you just said, Richard, there needs to be public leadership. There's private comments, but there's not public leadership. I've been watching the chat box, maybe you have too. And in addition to the comments I made about the councillors who've said that they're opposed, there's a comment from somebody who spoke to Martin Richma that said he's leaning towards no, that Bonnie Henderson will vote no if the emission levels are, I'm not sure exactly what it said in the chat box, but higher than expected, and that Bunting is in favor. So we're just sharing the information that you've gathered in your conversations. There's a couple things here we're going to follow up on, but I'm going to talk now about next steps. Is that okay? Our plan is to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes talk about next steps, and then we'll wrap the meeting up. Is that okay? I see a few heads nodding at me. All right. So just to repeat, it's very important that you continue to contact the mayor and the councillors. It's okay to send them emails. We understand their email box is overflowing. It's good to phone them. I understand their voicemail boxes are overflowing, but it's good for them to continue to hear from you. If some of you know somebody and have a more direct way to talk to them, please do that. We think it's really important to continue and maintain the pressure on Randy Pettipies. We know he's received over 300 emails since last week. Some of you have been making phone calls, like Margaret, or not Margaret. I've already lost the name of the person who talked to Randy. Yes, it was Margaret that talked to Randy Pettipies. So that keep those conversations going. We've added to the website on the Take Action page, we've added the name of Steve Clark. Now, Steve Clark is the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. He's the person that issued the MZO. And what we've done is we've listed his constituency office phone number in Brockville, not his minister's number, but his constituency number, and his email. And we encourage you to phone him at that number and to send emails, and we'll send out something tomorrow as a reminder to all this to make it easier for you and bring these contacts in front of you. Christmas is a time when we visit with our families and when we visit with our extended families and our friends in other communities. This is a good time to bring this topic up with your friends and your relatives and to encourage them to contact their MPP, whoever their MPP might be. And it's easy to search for your MPP's contact information in Google and have your friends and relatives who care about you and therefore care about your community to call their MPP and tell them that you're opposed to this for all the reasons that you're opposed to it. We are getting the message that Queen's Park is paying attention. I also want to talk about lawn signs for a minute. We've in total so far ordered 750 lawn signs and we have less than 100 left. And now that we know that the campaign's going to go into January, we're wondering about whether we should order more lawn signs or not, or whether everybody who has one wants one. So as I continue to talk, Danny's going to post in the chat box an email contact list, pardon me. And if you would like a lawn sign, if you don't have one and still want one, then please email that, send an email and request a lawn sign, and that will help us decide if we need to order more, how many more we should order, etc. I want to talk briefly. I'm not going to talk about, sorry. The other thing is, if you know people who are part of the Conservative Party Riding Association, or if you know people who are part of the Conservative Party, or if you're part of the Conservative Party, this is a really important time to call your members who are part of the Conservative Party and tell them that you're opposed to this. It's really interesting. We've had a couple of emails from people who are members of the Progressive Conservative Party in Stratford, and their emails to us have said something like, the environment, water and the environment is not an ideological issue. It's not a partisan issue. We all have to protect water and the environment. I think that's a very important message. And if you're a member of a if you vote Conservative, if you're a member of the Riding Association, if you're on the executive or you know people on the executive, it'd be really important to contact them and have them pass that message on to your MPP, Randy Pettipies. Now, I'm not going to talk about hockey, but I do want to build on just a little bit of something that Jamie was saying. And I'm trying to speak to the question that Tori raised earlier about what's our strategy. And, you know, I've worked on lots of campaigns in lots of different communities. We've won lots of campaigns. But I want to kind of normalize a couple of things for us here. We're going to find out whether the council can say no to this or not. We're going to find out. And we're going to continue to put pressure on the council for them to say no. It's possible we'll find out that the province of Ontario, Doug Ford, Randy Pettipies, Steve Clark, that they really want this to happen regardless of what the council does. So we have to keep our eyes on the prize and pressure the council to say no. It's possible that if they say no, we'll then find ourselves having to deal with the province. So that's partly that's tomorrow's task. But the other thing is we want to make it very clear to the province right now that if the council says no and they try and override that, they're going to have a big fight on their hands. So that's why it's really important to contact Randy Pettipies, Steve Clark, anybody involved in the Riding Association, and say that you don't want this. It's not good for the community. And if it goes ahead, there'll be a political price that they'll have to pay. So as we prepare for Christmas, we're going to continue to put out this contact information for you. We're going to continue to talk and think about other ways that we can put pressure on the council. If you talk to councillors, you talk to the mayor, you talk to Randy Pettipies, and you have information you want to share with us from those conversations, please send them to the Get Concerned email address. We read all those emails. They're very helpful to us. We share them. It helps us make plans going forward. I'm going to pause for a minute to see if there's any questions or comments about what we've said so far in the chat box. And then I'm going to take a minute just to introduce the members of the Get Concerned Leadership Group. I can't tell. I think Margaret Thompson's. Are you waving at me, Margaret? I can't tell, Margaret, if you're waving at me or you're waving to get on the speakers list or you're just waving me off now. And your lips are moving, Margaret, but I can't hear you because you're muted. Okay, is there a link for making comments about MZOs as Steve Clark has recently announced, says Dorothy. And if you mean, is there a link? Oh yes, okay, so the Environmental Registry, let me just back up for a second. The provincial government got themselves in some hot water because they passed some legislation before doing a public consultation on it, as is required by the Environmental Bill of Rights. So they're being sued by some environmental organizations for that. So to kind of backtrack, they've published a link for public comments on the Environmental Registry of Ontario website. And Dorothy has asked in the chat box, is there a link for that? Yes, there is a link for that, and we'll send that out to you. Just Danny, if you'll make a note, we'll send that out to people in an email in the next day or so. So folks, we're getting very near the end of our meeting here. So just to recap, Mike and Melissa met with the mayor, and he shared with us his plans, the council's plans for making timeline for making decisions about this, and asked what our real position is. It seems very clear to me from hearing the comments and watching all the comments in the chat box that, to quote a couple of you, it's a hard no. So that's the message the leadership will communicate back to the mayor and council. I see somebody in here says Gaffney supports the Xinyi. So it's going to be really important that we get 6 or 7 councillors to vote against this when it finally comes to council. You have 4 for sure. Tom Clifford's on the fence is 5, if that's accurate. Richma is leaning towards no, if that's accurate, that's 6. And Bonnie Henderson, if she's concerned enough about the emissions, is 7. So those are really people, those 3 people are really people to focus on the next period of time. The other thing is the mayor has not really declared what his position is on this. And so consistent contact, communication with and demands of the mayor is very important. Jeff and Joyce are asking, is there a survey or a poll tonight? And the question is, we're not doing a survey because it's just been so strong in the comments and in the chat that I don't think it's necessary. We've described some plans of action that we're going to take. We're going to follow up with you with some notes around that. If you want a lawn sign and don't have one, please email us tomorrow or the next day, because it takes us a week to order signs. And if we need to have more signs in January, we'd like to be able to make that order over the break. I think we're getting very near the end. I'd like to just call out, I don't know how we're going to do this, Danny, because I'm improvising, but I'd like to just introduce everybody who's on the executive. You heard from Jamie Gibb earlier. Is there a way for us to highlight Jamie and Jamie can wave at everybody?
I made everyone co-hosts. That's in the executive group. So if you guys just want to unmute and come on and just say hello to everyone, so everyone can put a face to a name, that would be wonderful.
Okay, so Jamie, you're first. Say hello, Jamie. Jamie's waving, but he won't unmute. Okay, how about Deb Smith?
Hi, I'm Deb. I'm on the steering committee as well, and I'm with Caremonger Stratford doing CAPS still. So you'll see me at all the rallies, and I'm here. Hi.
Thanks, Deb. Sharon Collingwood. Where are you, Sharon?
I'm here. Can you see me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
That's why I didn't press the button. Now you can see me. I can't
Here.
see me. See me?
We can see you now.
Okay. Well, I'm Sharon Collingwood, and I'm the sign lady, and I'm the website lady, and I'm the lady at the other end of the Gmail. And I'm always there.
You're always there. You're always there, Sharon. Doug Tripp.
Hi, I'm a new Stratfordite. Went from fighting a quarry in Rockwood, Ontario for 7 years, and here I am in the midst of yet another community battle, but this one's different, and you've got a remarkable community in Stratford. I'm proud to be a part of it.
And Susan Mcsherry.
Hi, I'm Susan Mcsherry, and all I can say is that my feelings about Stratford have intensified. I've always loved your city. I think the people in your community are absolutely top-notch, and the energy that we see and read in the chat and in emails and in conversations really is moving this campaign to different levels. And to the person in the chat room who wrote that they thought it was a done deal, it is not a done deal. And I speak as somebody who is involved in the fight against shingle planting welfare in Mossad Township. Fight on, folks, you can do this.
There's interesting comments in the chat box. There's lots of encouraging words. Melissa, are you still with us? Melissa was going to have to head out of town. So is she still here? Because Melissa, here's what's going to happen, Melissa. I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to say good night to everybody. All right. So I just want to speak to the done deal thing for a second. Melissa called me up on November the 11th. I remember this clearly, and I think it was the following Monday was the public meeting, and the following Tuesday was the council vote. It was something like that, and the feeling everybody had was, this is a done deal and we're up against it. And folks, here we are 6 weeks later. And it didn't get voted on then. All the things you said about how the community is organized around this is your doing. You've made this happen in the last 6 weeks. And the leadership group is terrific, and it's a good thing that there is a leadership group, but a leadership group by itself, without a community that's organized around it, has very little power. And you're a very organized, very compelling, very effective, well-organized group. And I'm from out of town, but what I'm hearing from you and seeing in the chat box is that this is the most organized maybe the community has been in a long time. Somehow this struck a nerve, and a lot of people see many things of importance attached to this issue. So congratulations to everybody, whether we're at the end of the first period or whatever it is, we've got to this point. The timetable has been set, a timetable. We don't know if it's the final one. A timetable has been set for us. We're in a strong position. We'll be relaxing a little bit over Christmas, I know, but we'll be very vigilant and stay connected. We'll stay in touch with you, and please keep doing all the things you're doing to maintain the pressure and profile on this issue. Melissa, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you everyone again for being here tonight. Thank you to everyone for your comments. I think that has been very, very powerful, just to give people a platform to speak and to get their thoughts heard by others. And I have loved listening to it. I've got pages of notes from tonight, from everything that's been said. It's wonderful. So I just want to thank you all for being here. And I'm going to echo Mike and Susan and just say that it is not a done deal. So just hang with us and keep up the energy. And lastly, have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. Be safe, be healthy, and we will see you all back here after Christmas. Thank you. Have a good night.